I'm back. Hello, everyone. If this is your first time on this channel, my name is Kiki, and I am back after a hiatus. And during that hiatus, I decided to live life so I could actually come back and tell you things. So I made a video a little earlier tonight. You can check that out. That is my weekly check-in that I'll be doing throughout the year to talk about the best week ever. And just pretty much I am logging and telling what has made each week the best week ever. I'm mostly doing this. I'm doing this for myself, but also to share with everyone else, just so you can see what it looks like. I have no clue what the results of this process will be. I really don't care. You're just joining me on the experiment. Um, I care about seeing what the results are, but I'm not attached to the process, if you will. I just want to keep on doing and keep on doing it, and then I'll be able to look back and say, okay, this is what this was. So sometimes that's how I like to do things. You don't need to have a goal or you in mind. It's more of I want to do this thing and I want to see what happens. What's up, Larisha? So, hi. I'm so happy. So I earlier I just made a quick video just giving my update and my check-in, but today right now I said I was going to come back and make a video specifically about what it was like when I first started dancing and going from who I was or who I had, I guess, what I had experienced or what I brought into this world. And now I'm going in to do this new hobby, and I just think I'm socially dancing. So let's do a little backup. If you don't know me, you don't know that for about, I don't know, almost 10 years, 9 years, my counting is totally off. It doesn't, I have no concept of time. But for a long period of time, I would say about 8 or 9 years, I made videos here on YouTube talking about spirituality. I covered the occult, I covered everything from the occult and just everything that I was interested in, which I would say the foundation was the occult, which means what is hidden. And that didn't necessarily mean I was into like, I don't know, like vampires. I have no clue what people would think the occult is if you don't know my channel. But for me, it was mostly about what I felt was hidden, right? The spiritual experience that I was having and that I had, that it felt like it came out of nowhere. Prior to me kind of going through that spiritual awakening, that really happened prior to me making videos on YouTube. So I had had these experiences, and then I think in the solitude of it all, I felt like I needed to share. And that's really how I came to YouTube. It was just the idea that I don't want to do this alone. And I did this alone. And now I'm wondering if other people have been going through something like this alone. So it was me looking for community, looking for people with shared experiences, and also giving, I felt, to people what I wish I had had, right? That kind of like knowledge, support, and all of that was going on. So I think we all go through these moments, not all of us, but if you are attracted to this kind of content, it means at some point you have gone through some kind of big shift or awakening. My background spiritually was that I did not come from a religion, but I had studied religions throughout my entire life. So I was really raised more as a critical thinker, but I was I was encouraged to explore all the knowledge that existed. So my mom made sure I went to a Baptist church. We would go to the synagogue. I've gone to synagogue. I don't think we never went to the synagogue together, but I've gone to the synagogues, the mosques. We've done that. So the Abrahamic religions were explored. And then of course I started to explore Hinduism, Buddhism, um, and meaning going to temples. I've been in all these spaces. And so just over time, really exploring all those things. But when I started to tap, and that was just kind of gaining knowledge, right? But when I started to tap in more, it was when I started to really like tap. It was when I started to have my own experiences. So it was dreams, like all this stuff was happening. I was having all these wild dreams. I was vibrating in my bed. Deities were coming to me. And I had questions. I remember having this dream about this word ibeji. I never heard the word ibeji before. And and my instinct, and in the dream, one of my professors was in that dream. So then I sent him I think I either call him or something. I'm like, hey, what does ibeji mean? He goes, oh, I'm a father of ibeji, which means twins. And I was like, huh? I was like, yeah. And so then all of a sudden that opened up a whole thing. Then there was another word in Kisi coming up, and I was like, in Kisi, what does that mean? I had to Google it and look it up. I'm like, oh, it's a vessel. It's also like meant to like it's like an ancestral kind of vessel that's used in it's really a symbol for like holding energy or holding energy, right? Look at that, Ibeji and Marasa, the divine twins. So I started to have a lot of these. I'll go to sleep and have all of these things just popping up, popping up. And that is how I started my spiritual experience as far as knowledge goes and seeking goes. Because I was like, this is too much going on. And it just would happen like this, all kinds of things. When it came to just just it was like a gross awakening, meaning all this stuff happened. I can't even think of everything, but I have a whole channel, if you look back on all those videos, where I talk about pretty much all the stuff that did happen over time. And so I had to find answers for this. I had to find information about it, and that's what I did. I was reading. I did a lot of reading, and then I was listening to podcasts. I was listening everything I found. One of my favorites was Brother Panic, but the reason why, and he passed, but the reason why I liked him was because he had a very matter of fact way of talking about these things. And so it no longer felt like a mystery. And he was really big on scholarship. And I'm like, well, good, because I was already big on scholarship. I was reading everything. So all of a sudden I got even more of a book list to look at and try to figure all this stuff out. Um, and for a while on the channel, we did have a book club. There was a lot going on, a lot of cool stuff where we explored different things. And yeah, Panic passed. He died maybe a few maybe last year or a year before that. I don't quite remember, but during my 2-year hiatus, he did pass. So, you know, but he had a really what I liked about him, there's so much that maybe I wasn't that into, right? I didn't relate to a lot of different things, but it was the books, right? It was the information, like the actual books that he was like saying, hey, check this out, check this out. And so it really helped ground things. And then there was a whole lot of books that he never recommended that I was looking at because it I related to maybe that information a little bit more for whatever reason. But that was the thing. It was all about following your intuition. You had these questions, and so then I would look it up. And that was how this channel really started. And then also, I think I had done Reiki training, and that opened up a weird world of having Reiki training and all these shifts happening. It was pretty much me feeling like I was ready to share my acquired knowledge and accumulate knowledge with the public. So that's how this whole thing started. So that meant for 8 years, 8+ years, I'm messing up these numbers. I should just look one day, but I don't know why. Why do that when I can just mess it up consistently? Um, but for 8+ years, I was on this channel pretty much sharing my knowledge and having fun making videos, being creative, and just utilizing all the what I had acquired so far just to share it and connect with people. That was, and it was a lot of joy. When I stopped, it had gotten to the point where I felt I had nothing left to say. I was like, I think I got it all out. And that's what it felt like. It felt like, um, you know, the biggest image that I had in my mind was from Forrest Gump. And when Forrest is running and and they're like, why are you running? You know, he just started running and there was no reason, he never spoke. And he's just running, 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 running. And then he just stops and he's like, I think I'm gonna go home now. Like, I don't know the exact line, but that was essentially how I felt. I had kind of gotten to the point where like, okay, I think I'm done, you know? And so time for me to go on home. And that's how I felt. And I had that vision. I will admit that I had that vision probably from the day I started making videos. That vision was in my mind, that scene from that movie, feeling like there was going to be a point where you've done everything. And I'm like, well, how will I know? And I just felt it. So then I was like, all right, it's time. And there was a big part of me that also I just didn't want to talk about this stuff anymore. And that was important to me. I'm like, I don't want to talk about this anymore, right? My spiritual journey became pretty private, and I liked that feeling that it was private. So, and even now in these check-ins, I, they're check-ins, and I'm just sharing. I mean, I am still sharing, but I think it's in a different way that feels good to me. So, after all of that, 2 years after me ending the videos, I decided to get back to do something that I really enjoyed. I didn't feel like I was really enjoying my life as much as I could. And I think that the COVID and pandemic really kind of put a spotlight on that. That as much as I loved um, being an introvert, I needed to get out. I needed to see the world, touch grass. So I'm like, do the thing you love. So I started dancing. At first, I started swing dancing. It was fun. It was cool, but it lacked a lot of. There weren't enough Black people and like just people of color in there for me. For me, I just need a little bit more rhythm, right? And it's not to say that people didn't have rhythm. It just wasn't as much as I wanted. So I was like, okay, I need a little something else. I need something that feels good to my body and it's also a challenge. So finally, I decided to try salsa. My hesitancy towards salsa and even bachata was that I didn't really like the intimate dances. I didn't like, I had tried doing tango a little earlier before that, like maybe a few years earlier. And tango was so intense. It was like I'm in these embraces with strangers, and it just did not feel right energetically. I'm like hugged up with these old men. It was weird. It was just too much. So it wasn't my idea of a good time. And so that was my hesitancy of like, well, what are you gonna do? Because swing dancing, you're not enjoying as much due to lack of rhythm. So I just said, let me just try salsa. Salsa, I found, wasn't as intimate. And there's a level of space you can have with salsa. You're still touching, you're still embracing, but it's more, in many ways, it feels more athletic. It feels more like it's there's more to it. Now bachata sensual, that's a little different. I have a lot of like grinding. I went to a party on Friday night where I feel like after the second bachata sensual, I was like, I gotta go home. I did like, it was like two bachatas I had. I was like, I'm done. I have been asked by the lead to go like this too many times. So it was time for me to go home. So like I feel that way about those kinds of dances. Um, so that's where I was at. I need to do a dance that feels good. I need to do a process that feels good to me. Salsa, I decided to try it. First class I get into, the teacher pretty much says, hey, this is an Afro-Cuban dance. So when he was already acknowledging the the foundation and the culture, I was like, all right, I'm in the right spot. Because it's so easy to try to like Europeanize it, anglicize it. People love doing that, right? Because swing dancing, what turned me off about swing dancing is that this started by Black people in Harlem, okay? Like there's no confusion about who started Lindy Hop and East Coast swing, okay? But they're playing country music and Elvis. This is unacceptable. So having those experiences, I'm like, no, I can't do this. I want to hear that jazz. I want to hear that big band. I want to hear, what inspired the actual movement. So to my first day in class, and I'm hearing this real reverence for the fact that this is Afro-Cuban, and my passion for exploring dances with that drum, with that reverence, with that understanding of footwork and intricacy, all that was exciting to me because to me, dance is a way to connect. And see, this is where the spiritual part comes in. It's a way to connect to your ancestors, and it's a way to connect to your lineage. And when we do those dances, when you do it with reverence, there is something about it that you feel like you are dancing with the people who were before you, right? That's how I feel, at least. So the more I get into it, and this is what I'll be doing this year. This is like I said this year is all about best connections. The more I explore salsa this year and even bachata, I am seeking to explore those roots through my body and maybe through what I believe is something that is deeply ancestral within me. So I'm really trying to dig deep and take away a lot of what I'm noticing is like that Europeanized way and really figure out how deeply rich and ancestral I can get in this movement. So that's my goal personally. So we'll see how we do. Remember that. Ask me later. We get to the end of the year. You're like, did you do it? Like, let's find out if I did it. But that has been that's my intention. So, and that's intentions and everything, meaning I'm not going to classes where I think it's not there. So if I feel like, hey, it's not there, or you couldn't even get it there if you tried, then I'm not going to those classes. I'm going to specific places where I feel like the reverence is there, so that it gives me room to do the deeper work that I'm seeking to do through dance. Because that to me is what it's about. Okay. So my journey continues, if you will, but I really am working to explore it through dance and through movement because it means so much to me. So, with all that in mind, I enter this dance class. But I have no skills yet, right? I don't have salsa skills. So, everything I'm telling you right now, I don't even know how to incorporate that. I have a better and this year I do, but I just need to learn first. I need to learn the basics. So, I'm hearing him say this, and I'm just like, all right, I'm in the right spot. So that was like my confirmation of like, you're here, you're where you're supposed to be. But then, and so then we're doing the Roomba, we're doing different movements. I'm like, yes, I know this. This feels good. It feels good to my body. I was very happy about this. And then I think after the first class, it was my first time in there. The teacher walks up to me, and he's really an odd personality. And it's so funny. I'm doing this with this in mind of like, this could get back to them. They might hear about me making these videos, and I'm like, well, if you ask, I would tell it to your face. He is different. They are the main two teachers are just a different breed of human beings, okay? Just different personalities, and maybe that's the kind of personality it takes to be able to run the studio and do their work, but they are different. And one thing about him is that when throughout my time of going to that studio, is that a lot of times he'll speak to me in like whispers, just like come up, and he'll be like, I'm like, okay, and then that's it. So my first day, he comes up and he goes, yeah, you know what, you should come back, and I'm like, yeah, I'll come back. So that was our conversation. So I was like, all right, that was really interesting. I had intended to come back because he said what I need to hear in the first class. And I needed that. So I came back, and I kept on coming back and working on my basics and working on and just building my foundation. One of those classes, so I had probably been a few months in, I'm guessing, before this occurred. So I'm doing my basic stuff. We're doing partner work, and you're learning just your left turn, your right turn, some styling, little things like that. Okay. Footwork hadn't really gotten into play. Slowly, he's starting to incorporate footwork because he sees like the importance of footwork in pretty much everything you do. And I agree, footwork is really, really important. I struggle with following choreography though. So in an hour class and you're teaching choreography and you have all these people around, it's really difficult. And I'm going to tell you a big reason why it's difficult. One, you could say it's ADD, right? And then you could take the spiritual perspective of it. And that is if energetically, right? I'm in tune with all these people in the classroom and they're all offbeat. It is hard for me to then recenter and keep myself going. I sometimes it felt like I could hear everyone's thoughts, I could hear everyone's everything, everyone's frustrations, and then I'm trying to look at him and focus on the class. It would be so hard. And then we rotate. And I'm the kind of person where if I were to really learn from him, I need him directly in front of me, or whoever it is directly in front of me. And that's it. You're the only person that exists. Now I'm going to learn. But classes, of course, you're rotating to the back of the line. So now who's in front of you may be getting it, may not be getting it. And it would just be very difficult for me to take in the information. There were times, especially as I got better, where he would, bring you to the front of the class, and like you're at this point, you're on display for everyone behind you. But I always appreciated that, not because I was getting everything he was teaching, I was getting it better, and then I was able to focus on just myself. So I say this because this following choreography is really difficult for me. So footwork classes were hard for me to jump into already. Now I'm coming into this class, and then he starts talking about Orishas. And I was like, huh? And I was kind of shocked by this. They're talking about, I think it was Shango that day. Yeah, Shango. And yeah. And I kind of like hinted at this like on one of my videos earlier that it was Himeyaz's name was pronounced in the weirdest way I've ever heard in my life. The effort was poor, and it kept on being pronounced that way. And then Shango was done right, but we are learning the movements that when I was first introduced into those movements, I was in Brazil, and in Brazil, I was at a ceremony, a candomblé ceremony, and it was a lot more reverent, and it's specific to candomblé. And when we were seeing the dances for the Orishas, you were looking at people who are the children of, Fiu or Fia, Da, Oshun, or Shum, really is how they would say it. Fiu Da Shum, or Fiu Ji Eshu, Fiu Ji Shango, right? So you saw this really clear, like, you are the child of, which means that a priest has gone, there's a whole process, right? A baba, or this was actually what's interesting about candomblé. It's actually run by women, as far as like the spiritual heads of each area, which is different from Santeria, and also different from voodoo. But the interesting part, that's what brought me to Brazil at that time, is because I really was like, oh wow, women are running this. So it was fascinating to see these women sitting in these thrones, and people coming up and paying like respect to them, and everything. It was very fascinating. So you're crowned. They call it being crowned, with a particular deity, uh, or Orisha, right? So it's better to say Orisha in this situation. So I was pretty, so my introduction is very particular. And so the way I understood it was, you are a child of, if you were doing that dance. And I respect it similar to the way that I respect the Divine Nine, right? If you are in the Divine Nine, if you don't know, those of course are historic Black sororities and fraternities. And if you are not an AKA, you're not making the sound for AKA, and you are not wearing paraphernalia for that, right? It's certain kind of respect. You've gone through a process, and you went through that process to become an AKA, right? I may not care. I have no concern, or I have no interest in different fraternities and sororities or wanting to be in it. But as a person, as being a Black woman, I respect the process that everyone went through, right? So I'm not going to imagine I'm a Q dog. I'm not going to imagine I'm a Delta. I'm not going to imagine I'm a Zeta. I'm not going to imagine these things because I didn't go through the process. So there's a certain level of respect about, we're not going to be wearing paraphernalia. We're not doing anything. Now, as a kid, I was ski-weeing all day long, okay? I'm legacy, though, for AKA. I want to be clear. As a kid, I had no clue, but I was taught. Eventually, it was like, there was this point where I knew I can't do that anymore. As a kid, when we would go to like step shows and different events, and they started ski weeing, man, I was ski weeing to the high heels. I mean, I'm so happy to know that I did it. Oh, I was going hard, right? But I was a child, and I didn't know, right? And I'm trying to keep that in mind. I'm trying to keep that in mind when I'm looking at this. But when I understood, then I was like, yeah, like I didn't do that anymore, right? I knew that, yeah, you can't do that. You didn't go through the process. You might be legacy, but you still didn't do anything. So I understood that. Okay. So when I'm looking at, when I'm learning candomblé and just, African traditional religions in general, I'm seeing that there is a process, right? Now, the conflict that I'm also having is that these deities have already come to me, right? And it's not just one. And I'm seeing a whole plethora of them, and they're coming whenever. So I'm not seeing Oya's coming to me, Oshun's coming to me, right? They're all coming in different ways. Shango, they're coming to me in their own ways. Ogun, and I'm like remembering all the ones that were coming. And so it wasn't just one. So there's no way for me to understand that, but I'm crowned. But I had this, but there's still a reverence that I have for the movement and the dance, right? So my approach to the deities were never to worship or do any of that, but just at least understand and respect. I couldn't imagine saying that dance that they're doing for Oshun, now I'm going to do it too. I just couldn't imagine that. So we fast forward. I mean, we're here, and now all of a sudden they're saying we're gonna learn the dance for Yamanja, whatever some crazy she said. Yamanja. I don't know what. It was so bad. It was so bad. Um, and I knew she knew she didn't say it right, because you could tell. You know how when you kind of messed up, you could hear it. But my thing is as a teacher, do some rehearsal before you come out and present this to people. But it's not their stuff. Maybe they have no. That was so hard about it. I'm like, this isn't your stuff. You don't really have respect for it, but you want to teach it to me. I'm having a hard time with this. Now, of course, I know they studied. I know they studied under someone, and someone had to teach them this. So someone had to teach them this, and they did talk about how they did take a lot of time to study this and to make sure they had it right. So as students, one thing about my teachers is that they are great students. You you can't they are great students, and so you see them and you see the effort that they're making, and so I see why they might have some level of confidence of like, I can teach it because of how hard I worked as a student. But then the other part of me is like, but you don't have the reverence for it, and you're teaching this like if someone were to be like, hey everyone, do you want to learn how to the equivalent I had that day was, it's pretty much like if someone's going to teach you how to, what is a Holy Ghost step, right? Like if you're in a Christian church and now there's going to be someone like, all right, everyone, let's come to my class. And now you're going to learn how to stomp and step when you catch the Holy Spirit. And there's no Holy Spirit around to be found in that sense. Now we know that it's always with you, but you know what I'm trying to say, that somehow you're taking out this process that's supposed to happen pretty organically and innately and spontaneously when you're in church and the spirits are high and you feel compelled to express yourself. And now they're like, let me teach you the technique of learning how to dance with your spirit filled with the Holy Ghost. That's what it was like, and I was like, this is insane. That's the best equation I could have. And so here we are. I'm in the class though, and I don't know what to do because I you realize I have come into this space just as my regular self. I'm just plain old Kiki. Sometimes even just my full name, right? And I'm coming in with no one knowing that's my background, no one knowing anything about me. So thankful that the channel never got that big so I could actually have these experiences. So I'm coming in with no one knowing anything. I'm just a regular person, just like everyone else. Meanwhile, I am dying inside and just totally like, ooh, falling apart of like, what is happening here and why is this happening? I was so conflicted with it all. I remember feeling sick. I felt all kinds of feelings. And so that was at that moment, I was like, I just started speaking to all the Orishas. I'm like, listen, we all been cool for a long time, right? Just help me get through this process. And let me just get through this process. And please work really hard for me to avoid this as much as possible. And that was essentially what I did. I got through the process, and I purposely didn't try that hard to do it. I was so sick. It was just so sickening, the whole thing. And that really turned me off. So, if anyone wants to know why I don't really go to footwork classes like that, it's because of that experience. And that experience happened probably, like I said, just a few months in of me coming to do it. And I've been dancing for 2 years. So for 2 years, I avoid a lot of that. Then I find out that on Tuesdays they had a class where a Cuban teacher, well, they said it's his, he said it was his teacher, was teaching different things. So they were teaching, I'm trying to think of all the ones that they were, Olodun? No, that's their being, they, did they do a Chosi? Different ones. Every week they were doing a different deity. And I was like, and he's from Cuba. He's teaching, and I'm like, does he have? At this point, I'm confused about what's happening here and why it's happening. Now, I will simply accept that for some reason. And I found videos online where people were doing these dances as a form, like a dance school. So I was like, fine, that's how they're doing it in Cuba. That's what they're doing. I can't get involved in that. And clearly there's some kind of revenue. I didn't see that happening in Brazil like that. Now they'll teach you about the Orishas and everything, but even there's even two separate presentations of it. I went to a candomblé, I forget what they're called, but like we'll call it like a spiritual space, right? Like a church, a temple, synagogue. So I went to a place like that, um, and that was during the day, and they did their own little, they performed in a way. It was a performance, but still these were people who were the children of, right? So I think we saw all the different ones coming through, and it was really beautiful, but you really felt like you were seeing a peek into the culture, but not like you can now go and do it too, unless you were willing to go through the process of that. So I went to that, but then I also went to the real one. And I went to the real one where I was dragged out of my bed at 1 a.m. In the middle of the night, and then and that was one of the most amazing experiences ever, because I get dragged out of my bed at 1 a.m., put my clothes on. I think I put on all white, and dragged out, and all of the people that I had seen along the way. From my cab drivers to one night, me and my friend were like just being totally like rebellious in many ways. Like we were just like, we hopped into this van with this big group of like a film crew, just randomly, all these random experiences that I had along the way, teachers that we had, people that we met. All of a sudden, I'm walking down, like, we get to the spot and I'm walking down and I'm seeing all of them, all the people that I saw along the way, and they're just waving to me. One of the most surreal experiences ever. I was like, you guys have been with me this whole damn time. And I just walked by and I waved to all of them. They were all there. It was so weird. So that's, things like that makes you feel like you live in a simulation. Because I was just like, huh? They all seem like random people, but then all of a sudden they were all there. Me being pulled out 1 a.m. midnight. So that was my introduction. And then I saw what it really looks like to see these deities like come alive in the human body and what it looks like. So me having both of these experiences, sometimes you can see on YouTube a little bit of that where it's very trance-like. They're in a trance. It's like they're doing the movements, right, that are connected, but they're in a trance. So you'll see that sometimes if you look up voodoo, right? I look sometimes to see if I see what I had witnessed when I was in Brazil. I haven't seen quite anything like that. That was something else. It was something else. And it was very similar to a black church in the sense of, how people catch the Holy Ghost, same thing. People start falling out. When and it was just this whole amazing like process of just this happening. And then after that, everyone would have food and eat, and just it was a lot of love too. So it was a really amazing, beautiful experience that I experienced. But at the same time, you see the level of reverence that I'm building up without even trying, just through my experiences. And here I am in a dance class in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona. And they just said, why don't you go over here so we can work on the movement? What? This ain't right. It didn't feel right. Like, I would love to tell you it was like, it wasn't right, because I'm like, none of these people really know what they're doing and why they're doing it. And you don't know what they believe in or what they're connected to. You don't know if this is what they want to do right now. Do they really want to be dancing to deities that are like, what is this? It was just bizarre. Like, I couldn't understand it at all. And like I said, I just started praying and praying and praying, just talking and talking, and I got through it. Um, and then I saw the teacher, and I had thought to reach out to the teacher who had taught them all of this, like, because I'm like, who did this? Like, who did this? Who gave them this to say, yes, this is okay? But I realized there were quite a few teachers. I went to a congress recently, beautiful black woman. She's Cuban, and she was teaching everyone this. And she wasn't a nice woman, but she was teaching them and so I was like, you know what? This is somehow an accepted practice throughout, but it's weird to me. It still doesn't sit right with me. And I even went to her class, but each time I went to her class, I did not move. I sat down. I just had to see it for myself, because it was in Denver. Both of her classes were in the end of the day. And I was in those classes. I sat my butt down and watched it. I just had to see what this was and why it was happening. And I would love to tell you that I figured out why it was happening, but I never figured it out. I don't understand why. Um, Now, of course, do I see the same kind of like spiritual experiences when people are doing the dances? No. Um, I don't think there's any connection, but I I don't understand why it exists. For me, I do think it's a little irresponsible, but that's so judgmental of me, right? Because maybe it's not. Maybe it is something that they feel is important to do as it allows the Orishas to, it's almost like keeping the Orishas alive without anyone knowing it, keeping that energy, keeping that. It's in many ways for so long. A lot of people didn't even know they existed. Most Black people don't even know they exist in many different ways. They're very Christian, so maybe this is a way that might open someone up to looking and asking deeper questions. It could be. I thought about that. I did think about that possibility, but it's just a lack of reverence for me that bothers me. You know, uh, so like you said, okay, let me just saying, like you said, we've given our legacy away. Now things get watered down, but it's still here. It's still here. Yeah. And I try to think about it like that. It's a big habit of us as Black people to essentially start something and then it's like it's gone and people feel like, well, everyone's stealing our stuff, they're stealing our stuff, and then but then we create something new anyway, and we're always creating something new. Like, our we started, East Coast swing and Lindy Hop, but it's so interesting how a lot of that movement, a lot of those concepts actually went into salsa that started in New York. And then here I am doing the dance now. I think whenever I see this stuff, though, I just always feel like we need to be aware and pick up these movements and dances. I don't know how I would feel if I saw. I will say this in Denver, because Denver, the one I went to, CalDAC is what it's called, and it's like CalDAC Conference, Congress, Afro Latino Conference for Afro Latino Dance. Afro Latinos in there. I don't know the rest. So that particular Congress is a real they you get it. They understand who is a part. They understand it's a real emphasis on the origins that these are all Afro Latino dances. So that's really kind of powerful at that particular Congress. And so you also see more teachers who are either of African descent in in that Congress. I had a great time at that Congress. And so you feel it more. You feel the soul, you feel the rhythm, you see a lot more of that there. Man, the fact that I was able to like take all these classes from people who look like me, I was in cloud nine. I was so happy. It was so beautiful. I could not get enough. So in that particular space, it felt different. And then when I saw that particular class, a lot of those teachers were kind of in the front in the corner, and I was watching them move and I was watching them dance, and it felt watching them. That part felt right. I'm like, this feels right over here in this small little corner. Watching the rest, I was like, what is this? Make it stop right now. But in that small little corner, it felt right. Everywhere else, I was like, please end this right now. So, people say maybe you can't gatekeep your culture, but it's hard for me. It's hard. I was okay with learning, East Coast swing from Koreans. I was all right because I had kind of accept. It was easy for me to accept that it's going to be hard for me to learn this from my people because those people had essentially they were either dead or they just weren't able. I had no access to them. And Phoenix, Arizona kind of has the same concept, right? But what I had a hard time with is it's just a lack of reverence. And I'm like, do you really got to teach this? I see it being taught less now. I do. And it seems like now we're seeing a lot more contemporary and even like ballet being put into the classes that are happening here. Classes, and I have no interest. I have no interest in that. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. These are, I haven't forgotten. I know what this is. These are Afro-Cuban dances. You have to connect to what it really is. Doing all this stuff. I'm like, come on now. I mean, it's cute. It's pretty. I'll just go watch Misty Copeland. You know what I'm saying? If I need that in my life. So that's just kind of how I feel. But this was my experience being, and it was one of the first times during my 2 years of, I mean, it really happened right when I kind of first started. And it was a big shock because I think I had thought that I would not be affected. I thought that I was going to live in my mind, a so-called civilian life. I would be able to live pretty anonymously. And everything that I had been talking about and whatever my life had been up until that point would kind of, like, I was just like, it was going to be new me, everything. And no, I could not separate my who I was to that experience, and I still have not been able to. In fact, I'm probably more clear about how much I don't like it. It just doesn't. I don't agree. It just doesn't work. I think there are a lot of problems in it, a lot, and it's interesting because a lot of the people that I met over time, they might be Christian, and they're different things. I'm just like, you don't even know what you're doing, and you don't really even seem to care. So that part is hard for me. It's really hard because I'm just like, how many other things do we do or have been put out there that really started with a deep, strong spiritual foundation, and it's just been given out, given away, you know, um, to for people to do whatever they want with it. In some ways, it's nice because it allows us to retrieve it and find it, right? Really Sankofa it up. And in other ways, it's hard because if you do know what you're looking at, it comes off as a bit disrespectful. But how can I? It's hard to say what's disrespectful when the person who's teaching him's got 4C hair, super light, but them curls are right there. You know what I'm saying? Super light, his face, you wouldn't even know. But one day, it's like, I think I saw him take off his hat. I was like, oh, shoot, my brother. Because everything else didn't really say it. It wasn't until that hat came off, I was like, my brother. But why? Why is this happening? And I didn't even, at the particular teacher, I didn't even know he knew other Black people until, like, I started to see, like, I think he brought in some drummers recently. And I went to that class, went to the class where he was teaching. And that class wasn't bad. He was teaching, it felt very authentic and everything. But at the same time, I'm like, is this just about money? Because this doesn't feel right. There are other things, 'cause I just don't get it. I still have yet to figure it out. And maybe one day I might have a real sit down talk with him if I have the patience. I have to figure that out. He mostly speaks, he doesn't really speak English. But maybe one day, because I need to understand why this is being done. But that was one of the biggest shocks for me going into salsa. It was a lack of reverence. It was, first I go in thinking there was reverence, and then it was like, nope, throw that all out no, we're about to do dances to Orishas. I mean, anyway, what do you all think about that? What would you have done in that situation? I just wonder, what would other people have done? Would you have kept dancing? I mean, I dance. I do. I mean, it's not like I let it stop. I had real goals, but it has bothered me for 2 years. Almost 2 years. It's bothered me for almost 2 years. It's probably one of the biggest disappointments that I have about my salsa experience. It might be the only one. That, and then what to me is deeply connected to that is as much as there was that acknowledgement when I first started, I feel it slowly kind of like trickling away. And that sucks to me. And that'll be another video where we talk about just movement and how it is very Europeanized or whitewashed in a way that is baffling to me. So I want to talk about that. That will be another one, especially with ladies styling. This stuff is fascinating to me because this is why it stands out to me the most. When you study West African dance, especially, and think about it, that's where pretty much that's the root of all of these dances. When you study West African dance, And when you realize the movement, and this isn't just West African dance, this is like almost most dances where the people are very grounded in touching the earth. So you also see this in the like Polynesian dances, Hawaii dances. We think of like hula dancing. It's very similar. Um, what those dances are typically are about is your everyday life. It is a connection to earth. It's a connection to, it's honoring the elements. It's honoring everything around you, right? So they're like movements in hula where this is the air and then you bring your hand down and that's the land, right? It's just, we see these beautiful hips moving and all that, but this is what the connection is, right? You are honoring those things. So to say we're just going to throw it in there in a choreography to music that people aren't really examining, like there's so many incongruencies happening and it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, this is not honoring holistically the dance or the movement. So I have a big problem with that. And you see, so I'm starting to see that even with styling. It's like styling, it's all about styling and looking good and making things look sweet and cute. But when you look at African dance, when you're looking at West African dance and they're bringing their hands to the ground and bringing it up, that's beautiful too. And it's actually honoring the earth, right? It's honoring the earth and bringing it up to the sky. Like there's, hello, talking about growth. So there's all these, putting things in different areas. Like it's very clear why it's happening. And so why wouldn't that understanding be put in? Why are we just, I have to do a whole video on this, but I should just call it that video should be called the attack of the hair comb. And we'll get into that. I got to get all this stuff off of my chest. I hope you guys enjoy it. But that is a big issue that I discovered along the way in my beginning. So thank you all for listening. And I just want us to think about it, especially from a spiritual perspective. Like, what is this? And what are the implications of this for people? So, Larisha, yeah, dance is supposed to move energies, yes. And I also want to say this. There's a really wonderful teacher that I love. He's out of New York. And for some reason, why is his name? His name is escaping me, but I'll remember it one day. I love this guy. Last name is Martinez. And he studied for a long time. He's like one of those people who studied under like the Eddie Torres. And he's, when he talks about mambo, mambo is what used to be called the dance of salsa. So salsa is supposed to be like the music and mambo is the dance. And when you hear mambo, it means, listen to the word mambo, everyone. We already know that that's also the name of spiritual leaders in voodoo. So come on now, we know these words. These words are here. And there's a dance called mambo, which is technically what salsa is, right? Sometimes it'll be interchangeable. Sometimes they'll just make it seem like mambo is just a small style, but it depends on who's teaching it. But he will describe mambo really as the actual dance, and it's a conversation with the divine. Mambo, a conversation with the divine. Now think about that. If that's what it is, and that's what we are doing, and we're too busy doing some other crap, I need just Louise. Woo! I'm so glad I can talk about this stuff now. I feel like I have been suffocated and censored for so long. It's been a long time being censored here. If that's what we're doing, and our focus is on what? I can't even figure out what the focus is sometimes in class. And so I know that these teachers don't necessarily have the capacity or the capacity to cover it. I understand that. I totally get it. But this is spiritual work. The dance is spiritual work. And maybe no one else sees it that way. But for me, it is deep spiritual work. And when I'm especially like very conscious of it, if I go into class that way, feeling that way, man, I'm like, oh, I'm having a hard time. I feel sick. Even now, like I'm thinking about the way that I feel sometimes when I don't feel that reverence. I feel sick. I'm like, this isn't right. Why is this happening? This is deep. Dance is deep spiritual work. It is why when you see it in churches, when people start to feel the Holy Ghost, they start dancing. Right? When you're at these particular ceremonies, and dance is crucial. They are dancing. The way your body responds to spirit, the way your body appreciates spirit is through dance. And then the movements that we have is through our connection with the earth and the elements. It's all there, right? Even when people started twerking, they started criticizing that, and twerking was happening more and more and more. And the more and more women started talking about it, especially women who also started to become more awakened, they were like, sorry, twerking is opening up my womb and I'm feeling more connected to my womanhood. Twerking is making me feel powerful. Yes, it does. These are the elements of what dance is. And now you out here doing what? So it's been really hard for me, but that's just how I feel about it. And I respect the fact, yeah, you got to teach what you know. And if that's what you know, you have to teach it and you have to do your best at doing that. And then you also have to know your audience, right? And maybe the truth of the matter is I'm the only person in the audience is feeling that way. So they cannot make classes to just accommodate me. But I don't think it's possible. I mean, and maybe there wouldn't be a salsa community if the approach was the true reverence and understanding spirituality of dance. Maybe there wouldn't be a salsa community. I don't know. I don't really know, but I can tell you that's my problem with it. That's my big problem with it. But y'all know I love to do it. I'm out every weekend. I gotta dance. I'm always out here enjoying myself, and you're gonna hear more about that as this year goes on. So I mean, it's not like it stops my joy, but in my own progress and development as a dancer, that's my focus. So, all right. Hallelujah, hallelujah magic. I hope you guys enjoy this journey with me. Maybe this will attract dancers too, because it would be fun to hear. I want to know what other dancers think. So I want to start seeing, I want to hear those conversations. I want to know if it's just me. Because right now, I'm going to tell you all, right now, it feels like it's just me. There's been a few times in small spaces where I've talked about this and I'm talking to myself. And so I'm like, is it really just me that feels this way? I don't understand why if it is just me. So we're going to find out. All right. So hopefully, so if you know anyone who dances, who's also spiritual, bring them to this video so we could talk. I need conversations. I need to know who else is doing this, who else feels this way. All right. Hallelujah, hallelujah, magic. Oh, Io and Vunya just came out. It just came out. Yo, Vunya. If you guys want to know what Io means love. Vunya means gratitude, thank you. That happened in one of my videos where we were doing glossolalia or speaking in tongues, or it's called different things, but language came out that way, and that's what those things mean, and it just came out right now. So, all right. Bye-bye. Have a good one.